My friend Simon, we are live.
We're live. Woohoo! Rock and roll. Come on.
Rock and roll. Where are you today, Simon?
I'm at my home. I've been here for the last. I don't think I've ever been in my home for so long, Stoy. I've been in my home now for 3 months, and we just rebuilt our home. So it's like actually, to be honest with you, although notwithstanding the challenges that we've all had, it's been an amazing time because we've just moved back into our house. I've had my 2 boys here. You know, I'm constantly on the road like you. I'm always traveling. So to have 3 months, uninterrupted, no travel with family. My eldest boy's just gone back, but to have this period with all together is like, it's unheard of. This hasn't happened since my kids were much younger. So it's been a real joy in so many ways. I'm not saying it hasn't been challenging. It's also been challenging, but it's been a real joy. So I'm speaking to you from my home in Jersey by the beach, in my beach shack.
Beautiful, man. Beautiful. I think I shared this with many people, but for me, this whole situation, as much as it's difficult for many people, for me has been the biggest blessing ever. The opportunity to really slow down and to reconnect with the things, with my purpose, with what are the things that really matter for me, and trying to allocate more focus and energy on those things, which I wouldn't have the chance with my crazy dynamic traveling lifestyle that I used to have before this thing happened. So I'm really grateful actually for this opportunity. And for those of you who are watching us right now, I just want to say I'm really grateful to be here with a good friend of mine, somebody that has helped me a lot on my professional journey, I would say. We've been challenging each other for a while, like to become better coaches. I met Simon back in 2014 together with our common friend Dimitri Lakov, another exceptional coach, at a training at IPEC Coaching in London. And ever since we've been in touch and exchanging resources, and it's been such a pleasure to be following your journey, Simon, your journey of personal transformation. First of all, because I've been close to you and I know that you've been working hard on yourself, not just with your clients, right? But also your journey as a professional, like reaching the heights of working with some really exceptional people. And we're gonna speak also a lot about that. But why don't you share with the people watching, Simon, a little bit about you, like your story, your background, and who's the person they're watching basically at the moment.
Well, thanks, Story, for that lovely introduction, and the feeling is very mutual, as you well know, because I love working with you. You're a superstar. My story, oh my goodness, it was messy. It's been messy. I mean, in all honesty, I could cut through all the bullshit and say I've spent 45 years. I'm 50. I turned 50 last year, and I reckon I spent 45 years basically trying to find who I truly was rather than who I thought I should be, or maybe who society expected me to be. So, we all go through, as children, we all go through our lives somewhat unconsciously because we don't know that we can interpret things differently. We don't know that we can ask better questions. We don't ultimately know that we actually have control over our destiny. So we are very susceptible to being conditioned by our parents, by our family, by our friends, by our school, by everything that goes on around you. And I say this with no blame and judgment. It's like, it just is what it is. And I guess through my life, I've done many things. I spoke at a conference not that long ago, and my CV was for everybody to see, and they could see British Army. They could see what was SWAS out in Hong Kong and Papua New Guinea in Australia. They could see I was a trustee of 2 different firms and a partner and owner of one. They could see that I'd set up and run 2 different family offices. They could see I was a life coach. And they could see that I was a consultant working with these really big families. And I kind of slightly self-deprecatingly said, so, what do you think? And they said, well, my guess would be is that you didn't really know what you wanted in your life. You never knew who you were. And I said, absolutely, bang on. I really didn't. That's the truth. My journey through life has really been to kind of rediscover who I truly was. And that doesn't mean reinventing and finding a new version of you, by the way, because I think that's a really important point. A lot of coaches talk about, being the best version of you, and you you can learn to be a different version of you. Well, of course you can, but sustainable fulfillment and from a place of love, which I'm all about heart, is all about peeling the onion back to who you were truly born to be, with and bringing your unique gifts to the world as you were really designed to. And one of my learned behaviors, which I will share with you, Stoy, is I've suffered quite a lot of pain. And I use the word suffering. Suffering is optional. Pain, everybody's going to experience, okay? Everybody's going to experience pain, but whether you choose to suffer is a different thing in life. But I've probably experienced my fair share. No, not saying it's more or less than other people, but I use the metaphor in life that whatever lessons you need to learn, they keep coming back to you with increasing intensity until you learn them. And it's the feather, brick, truck metaphor. And I got my feather very early on because I left the British Army, and I was very good in the Army. It was kind of my thing. I was actually very much a round peg in a round hole. It was outdoors. It was actually surprisingly creative. It was a leadership role. It was very physical. It was working with people with like-minded values. I had a great time. But when I left and I got married very young and I had kids very young, I chose to take the path of probably most resistance, which was to go and become a chartered accountant and to train with Ernst & Young. It was the most painful 3 years of my life. It literally nearly killed me twice, put me in hospital twice. I call that wasn't actually my feather, that was my brick. I got 2 bricks back into 1997 and 2000. But my feather was always there. It was like my intuition was always telling me, oh, you should be doing something that's more aligned with kind of you emotionally. And I was always a very emotionally sensitive person. I was always hyper aware of kind of what other people were feeling in a room. And I would often mistake those feelings in a room for being my feelings as well, and then turn it back in on myself. And my learned behavior through much of my life was, you can't be emotionally sensitive, because if you are, it's a sign of weakness, and you won't be successful, and you won't actually get what you want in life. So I spent the next 20 years of my career, hence the feather brick truck, kind of dumbing down my emotional sensitivity. I wouldn't say being the tough guy, but being the corporate guy. I was in a corporate world, Ernst & Young, huge family-owned business called Swaz, which is a big corporation conglomerate, thrusting through to be a partner of a trust business. And it wasn't really me, and it certainly wasn't authentic to me. And so eventually, life always will bring you back on track. So I got my bricks in 2000. I have quite a high pain threshold, so I paid zero attention to the bricks and said, I have no choice. I have to pass these wretched exams. I have to provide for my family. I have to look after them. I need to get through this. So I got through it, and I then got set on this path kind of really automatically kind of into this sort of financial path for the next really 15 years of my career. And but all things come to a head. And for me in 2008, I had a complete breakdown. I couldn't get out of my bed for 3 months. My mind was completely out of control. I didn't know really how to control my mind, and that's a very, very, very terrifying place to be. And that's really when I started my journey back to me. And actually, the really interesting thing is that when you're in a really bad space, you often hear from people saying, oh, well, you need to go and do CBT, or you need to go doing some kind of cognitive type process. Well, for me, that was the last thing that would work, because my brain was in such a bad space that it was like a rampaging bull. The only way you can find your way back, and this is very relevant also for ex-military people, as I am myself with PTSD, you can't think your way back to you. You have to feel your way back to you. And I think one of the biggest lessons that I've had in my life is, first of all, that my emotional sensitivity was actually my superpower. It was not my biggest weakness, but for 20 years of my life, it was my biggest weakness. And secondly, it was like, just come back to actually who you were really born to be. Really come back to who that authentic person is in your life. But it took me, as I said, it took me 20 plus years. When I had my breakdown, I went on my journey. I went through every form of modality. I was medicated. I saw therapists. I saw psychologists. I did CBT. It actually took me to go on an amazing course called the Lightning Process, which combines, it was like a powerful toolkit that combines so many different modalities, but in a very physical way, that created that pattern interrupt to get me out of my head and back into my body. And we all know that Tony Robbins, and he's an amazing guy, but he says, in your head, you are dead. And if only more people realized in life today how true that is. We are taught and conditioned to live in our heads and to trust facts, to trust analysis, to rationalize, and basically to make a lot of shit up and believe our bullshit stories, which all happens in our head. And when we're in our heads, we're stuck in the future or we're stuck in the past, but we're very rarely ever in the present moment. But when you're in your body, it's almost impossible to be anywhere but in the present moment. So I guess in a roundabout way, that's been my kind of messy story. There's been a lot of failures, there's been a lot of pain, there's been some optional suffering. But it's kind of, as I look back in hindsight now, it's put me in this amazing place where my career makes sense, because I look back over the 20 years and I could easily have gone, God, Simon, what did you do? You wasted your time, you messed, you hated what you did, you should write all that time off. But I don't at all, because all of those painful lessons that I learned, all of those times of optional suffering, and all of the learning that came with it through the failures as well, put me in a position where I can today do the powerful work that I do with families as well as I do with individuals. And I never would have been in that space had I had a different journey. And learning to reframe the way that we all look at our pain, and to look at our pain from a really positive perspective, and actually to find the purpose behind that pain, and to say, yeah, shit, that was unpleasant. It wasn't fun. That was pretty stressful. I put my family through a lot of shit too, which I certainly am not proud of. But there's no way that I would be able to do what I do today with the power that I can do it with if I hadn't gone through those life experiences, those very real experiences. So that's my messy story.
It's beautiful, man. I came up with maybe 7 questions already that I want to ask you, and I think there's a lot of people super interested. We already had like I don't know, 6, 7 questions coming from people. Before we get there, I just want to ask you. You said something really interesting. The journey back to myself.
Yeah.
I think I want you to elaborate a little bit on that, because I think we have this perception often that you need to get better and become somebody else that is better.
No.
And I love what you're saying, because I think this is kind of it will be very useful for many people to hear. So can you elaborate a little bit what you mean by that?
No, sure. Well, I can elaborate because it's very personal to me. I mean, we, as I said, we become the stories that we believe to be true about ourselves, and that's part of our conditioning. So the beliefs that we have about ourselves, which are, and I'm talking about the more limiting beliefs that we have about ourselves, and the stories that we believe also about the world that we live in. It's like wearing a pair of goggles. That's how we see our world. But that's not, that's not us. But the journey back to you is ultimately all about, we are the jewel. We're born perfect. We're born with these incredible gifts. And the universe, if you believe in the universe, or if you believe in God, whatever you believe in, the universe intended for you to bring those gifts to the world. But through our conditioning, we unlearn those gifts and we take on lesser gifts from other people, which we learn, and we're led to believe, oh, that's what I need to be the best version of me. That's what I need to be successful. I have to tick that box. But so we unlearn how to be ourselves over a period of time. So we become lesser versions of ourselves over a period of time. We become watered down versions of ourselves. And I like to think of it, it's like a bit like buried treasure. It's like the treasure is always there. It's always there. So, but it's buried, because it's buried beneath these layers of beliefs and these layers of conditioning and these layers of experiences that have then compounded the beliefs that we have about ourselves. So you need to peel the onion back, which is really, a lot of my clients call me the onion peeler because I make them cry. And but you need to peel the onion back if you really want to discover who you are. It's not about trying to find a 2.0 version of you and reading the next self-help book. Don't get me wrong, that's all great, but it's actually all about going within, and it's all about going back to what were my happiest moments when I was a child? What were the feelings? What were the feelings? We talk a lot about thinking, but we don't talk enough about feelings. What were the feelings that really, really, for me, were really special? For me, it's freedom. It's like when I don't feel free, it's a very dangerous space to be. So, and I spent 30 years of my career feeling caged, not free, super successful, lots of money, doing really, really well. From the outside in, everyone would be going, wow, but I was crippled inside. Emotionally, I was bereft because I didn't feel free. I didn't feel content. I didn't feel inner peace. I was crippled by anxiety. And ultimately, why on earth would you want to tick all of those boxes of outcomes when you're not feeling good within yourself? And it's the feelings that are really the clue to who is you at your unique self. And it's about uncovering those experiences when you were in the flow, when you were in that moment, when you felt good about yourself, when your intuition came alive. Maybe you were highly creative. We all know that space called flow state, when you hit that space where time almost kind of stands still. It's like you could be doing something for 3 hours, but it feels like 3 minutes. Well, those moments are really very special because they are really showing you something. Because if you can hit those states, you must be doing something that you are inherently very good at. You must be. It's like, it doesn't matter whether you're surfing or whether you're riding a horse or whether you're a teacher or whether you're whatever it is. When you hit that state, that's nirvana. And that's when you're in your heart, and that's when you're centered. And that's when you talk about productivity. I mean, hyperproductivity only happens when you're in your heart and you're centered, because you are only focused on what's right in front of you right now, not thinking and catastrophizing about the future, making shit up, believing all the bullshit stories to be true, and not also drawing on our shitty past experiences and saying they happened in the past, they're going to happen again in the future. It's about being in that present moment. So yeah, the journey back to you, from my point of view, is you've got to ask the difficult questions. You've got to do the interior work. You're going to cry. You've got to get rid of some of the bullshit beliefs, the systems that are actually not you. You might well believe they're you, yes? So you might believe they're you with a capital T, but they're not. They're you with a small t. And the journey back to you is all about finding where's the capital T, where's the real truth. And to do that, you've got to do the work. And that means you've got to go back in your past, and you've got to rediscover who you were truly. And when you're at your happiest, you've got to discover your belief systems that you have in your life and whether they're actually serving you. And you have to then ask a better question, because nothing in life changes until you first become aware. Number one, awareness is the key. It's the absolute key. Do I like my life how it is right now? And if the answer to that is a resounding yes, then why would you want to do the work? But if the answer is a resounding no, I don't, or actually I'm feeling that feather tickling me, like I'm curious, I want to know more, then ask a better question. And the journey back to you is all about asking the better question, and another question, and another question. Actually, it's usually about asking 6 or 7 of the same sorts of questions to get back to the source. It's about getting back to the root cause. And I think a lot of people nowadays want quick fixes. They want a solution now. They want it on tap. They want a kind of, whatever the word is, I can't think of the word, but they just want everything right now. And the reality is, anything that's worthwhile in life requires work, and it requires being uncomfortable, and that's growth, and that means taking a risk. And that's the work that takes longer to do, but it is so rewarding in the long run, because you end up then being authentically you. I mean, I always say to my clients that when you get to the stage where you're unapologetically you, then I know that I've done my job. It's like, I know that I've done my job. It's like, I know you're going to be happy. I know you're going to be fulfilled. I know you're going to be successful because you're being unapologetically you. Sorry, I've talked a lot around this question there.
Man, I absolutely love this. And I love what you mentioned about productivity, because I have a sense that when somebody mentions productivity, they think about this hyperactive, achiever mode, which is like about only getting things done.
Yeah.
And I don't believe this is what the productivity is all about. It's about being mindful.
Totally.
It's about being very clear about who you are, what makes you happy, what matters for you, and how do I use my time appropriately so I can be engaged and committed to being present in the moment and making progress on the things that matter to me.
Totally true.
But it's such a mindful approach to this, and we actually have a few questions right now, so I want to get into it.
Go for it.
First of all, you mentioned clients. Like, I'm very curious to know. Many people watching right now, you've been working with families of billionaires, ultra net wealth families.
Yeah.
How does one start to work with billionaires? A lot of people watching right now, probably coaches and stuff. What do you like? How did it work for you? What is your story about it?
Well, I actually truly never really had a life plan for that. It just kind of happened, and I'm a massive believer that if you keep taking risks in life because you have a growth mindset and you genuinely want to be the best version, the most authentic version of you, you're going to increasingly put yourself in situations where opportunities are going to come about. And the way that the opportunity came about for me was because I was running a family office, not for a billionaire, For a guy who's worth about 100 or 200 million, a lot of money. It's all just numbers at the end of the day. And it took a chance. It took a chance encounter with this one person. And I always say to people, it's like, you know, if you're looking to get on in life, and if you're young and you're looking to make a career in life, it takes one person to change your life. It can be one meeting, it could be one phone call, it could be one interaction. Even an interaction on social media could change your life. And that's an incredibly powerful thing. And certainly for me, I've never had a grand plan in my life. I kind of felt like I knew the sort of direction that I needed to be going after my breakdown in 2008, but I didn't really know. But I just kept moving towards it. And as I kept moving towards it, opportunities arose. And then while I was in this family office, I met somebody, and he then said, well, actually, it's funny because there's this family who are huge, and they're a multi-billion-dollar family in the Middle East, who I think really need your help. And then that led to another meeting and an interview and what have you. And then while I was in that family, seeing the mess that they were in and all of the issues that were going on, I really needed to have somebody to come in from the outside in to do what I considered to be the really important work, which was to really shine a light on some of the really bad emotional dynamics that were going on within the family that were really killing them, and the really toxic behavior. Because it's very difficult from when you're within a family being employed to speak your truth with the same level of conviction and the same power as when somebody from the outside comes in. And so it was a chance encounter with somebody who was referred to me through a friend, and he said, look, you really need to meet this guy called Martin. And he came in, and he was that grenade in the room to kind of create that huge pattern interrupt for this family. And off the back of that chance encounter, I was like, wow, what this guy does is really, really interesting. In fact, actually, what this guy does is really much more what I think I'd like to do, because he's dealing not with all of the structuring aspects of a family, you know, setting up a family office or an investment committee or shareholder boards or whatever it is. He's actually dealing with what's really going on at the core, which is the emotional dynamics of the family. Because at the core of every relationship, whether it's you individually or it's a big family, and doesn't matter how wealthy they are, if the family is not functioning well at the center of it, and if they're not in a loving place, not fear, okay, because fear is all fight, flight, freeze. I win, you lose energy, yes? If they're not in a loving place, having open and honest conversations, having the real conversations, so there's nothing left off balance sheet, yeah? There's no unspoken truths. If they're not doing all of those things, there's no good governance. But anyway, long story short, yeah, it was chance encounters. But I think, I don't believe just in chance. I believe that if you put yourself out there, if you are consistent with it, if you really have a growth mindset, if you just say, yeah, yes, I'm going to say yes, I'm not going to say no. That's my other advice to anybody young who's listening today. It's like, say yes to stuff. Don't say no. Don't close doors. Just say yes to stuff, because you're not necessarily going to know what you want to do in your life. But the only way you're going to find out is by starting to do something. And for me, to be really honest with you, I spent 25 years doing stuff I really didn't enjoy. But I'm really grateful that I did it, because first of all, I learned what I really didn't enjoy. And then when I found something that I really did enjoy, then boy, was it nirvana for me. It was like, oh yeah, I want more of this. This is what I want more of. And I'm a massive believer in, I know you are, Stoy, you're a massive believer in energy, yeah? Energy attracts like energy, you know, it's the law of physics. If your energy is vibrating at a high level, and, you know, you're going to attract more of the same energy into your life. And for me, I guess, it wasn't that I visualized it totally, although I did do a vision board, but I was like, I want more of this. I'm a quality guy, not a quantity guy. I don't want to be out in mass audiences. I want to be working with some really cool people. Everybody's cool in different ways, yeah? But I want to be working with some people who've done some really interesting stuff in their lives, and actually probably have got a lot of shit going on too, because that makes it more interesting. And it was opportunities that just came knocking, because I guess I made myself more lucky.
I so much believe in all these things, Simon. You know that because we've been having a lot of conversations. But when you set your intention, and you've been working hard all your life. I mean, a lot of the things you've been doing, maybe you haven't enjoyed them, but I know your level of commitment, so I know how good you are in what you do. So having your level of capability, skill set, mindset, energy, and then once you're ready, you set your intention, you start attracting those things. It's just exceptional. And talking about these things, we have a comment from Dante. She's a founder from Turkey, now based in Estonia, running a startup. Very ambitious founder. She was so excited to see you. She posted a few comments yesterday.
Yeah, I saw that. Great questions. Yes.
So let's maybe take first a question from her. So what she's asking is, Actually, there's a few questions, but I'll let you decide which one to take.
Yeah, go on.
What are the common personality and work traits of a billionaire and a startup founder?
Ooh.
And what are the main differences? What is the hardest part of a for startup founders to unlock their true potential? How the breakthroughs work for a person? Is there a breakthrough come from a sudden, or is it the develop of a certain period of time with consistency on good habits? Okay, this is a set of questions.
Okay,
Maybe we can take the first one.
You might have to replay some of those ones to me, but to start off with, kind of what are the common personality traits?
Yes.
Of the uber successful people, and I mean uber successful from a financial perspective, okay? Because how you define success is not, how we all define success is different, but society defines success very much around wealth, which I think is a real shame, but it is what it is. What I would say with people who are really super successful financially and who are billionaires that I've worked with is, I mean, Robin Sharma uses this phrase monomaniacal, and it's a pretty good phrase actually. They are monomaniacally obsessed about what they do, and they don't just obsess about it from a macro level in terms of strategically. They're also very good at being in the detail. I've always been staggered at how incredibly keen their attention to detail is and how often they get in at micromanaging at different levels. But it's that obsession, it's that single-minded focus, and when you have single-minded focus, I mean, I use Lance Armstrong as a good as a good example here. Something has to give. Yeah, so these guys and girls, they are not what I would call necessarily well-balanced individuals. This is being brutally honest. They don't have balanced lives the way that we would like to aspire to having balanced lives. And, it's like a three-legged stool, our lives, isn't it? You don't want to have just one leg, otherwise it falls over. But, these billionaires, they really do focus on one leg, and they focus on it to the detriment, sometimes to the detriment of a lot else that's going on in their lives. And one of the reasons why I do have the work that I do is because one of the biggest areas where they don't spend the time and effort, because they're great wealth creators, is with their family. They do not invest anywhere near enough time and effort with their families. And it's usually a big hole that needs to be filled, and with a whole load of underlying issues that need to be resolved and brought to the surface. But they're intensely driven. They're pretty charismatic. I would say that in different ways, though, sometimes very low-key ways, but it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but often quite low-key in a surprising way, but also very charismatic. And again, we talk about energy. It's like you walk into the room with these guys and girls, and it's like, there's somebody there. It's like, you're with a silverback gorilla in the room. It's like you just do. It's just, they don't even have to say much. You just sense that energy. And there's always some element of them which is genius. There's always some element of them which is genius, where they are really the master of their trades. They have many faults and flaws, like we all do, and those often later in their lives come back to really bother them and to really hurt them. But they create their wealth because of their obsession, because of their single-minded focus, and because they do have that genius quality in some areas. Yeah.
And they do amplify. They focus on this genius quality they have, and they just go all in, right?
Yeah, and they bend reality. I mean, something Vishen Lakhani wrote this book. I think it was is it the Code of the Extraordinary Mind, which I thought was actually a very good book. And I'm not plugging him here, but it was a good book. But he talks about how very wealthy people bend reality to suit themselves. And I've and I guess you could say, if I was being harsh, that verges on the sociopathic, narcissistic traits that you often see in highly successful people. And it's true, you do see that in highly successful people. They are not what I would call necessarily well-rounded characters. They are very obsessive characters, but they bend reality, and they're very, very good at distorting and manipulating whatever they believe to be their reality and convincing others to buy into that reality. They have this amazing ability to convince others to buy into their distorted view of reality if it suits their needs to build what they want.
Do you find this to be authentic? Do you find this like, I believe in this, I'm going to convince the rest, or it's like, this is my goal, I'm going to convince the rest so I can get my thing?
So I think that it's a really interesting question. That I think that they create their wealth on the way being pretty authentic. But I think as the wealth accumulates, and as the complexity accumulates, and as the responsibility accumulates with it, which is a big word, I think they increasingly become less authentic versions of themselves, because they almost become a victim of their own success in terms of the level of complexity that they create around their world. I mean, I have one of my clients and we laughingly say, we talk about stuff and staff, but the amount of stuff and staff these guys have in their world is just mind-blowing. And the amount of hats they have to wear in terms of their roles and responsibilities because of their wealth, whether it's because of their foundations, their investments, their businesses, whatever else they're doing, their family councils, they've got so much going on that I think that it becomes very difficult for them to truly live their authentic lives. And you touched on another interesting point. I think it becomes harder for them to have really authentic relationships because everybody parasitically wants to kind of latch on to these billionaires. Like everybody wants to sell something to them and buy something from them and tell them whatever they want to hear. And I think they get sick and tired of that. And I think their learned behavior sometimes is to become less authentic versions of themselves. And so they actually zip their hearts up and become less vulnerable. They become less open to taking risks. They're less open. And I've seen that time and time again with every single very wealthy patriarch and matriarch I've worked with. Yeah,
it's super interesting, man. I hear many people, saying I want to be a billionaire, but I think they want the good part of it. Like they don't understand probably. I don't know billionaires, so I have no idea. But from what I'm hearing, from what I can imagine, is probably pretty tough. It's probably pretty tough with all the complexity, as you said, the difficulty to, people meet you and you mean that they have something nice to offer, but maybe they want something from you. So it's such a complex and difficult thing. And you mentioned roles and responsibilities, which is really interesting because we had a question again from a Turkish founder.
Yes.
Seems like, by the way, there's a lot of people who follow me, who I'm connected with, who are founders and entrepreneurs. So I'm sure that's going to be a question that they'll love. So the question is from my good friend Izet, from the CEO of Bobu. And his question is, how can you allocate or define business roles among high net worth family members? It should be a real challenge because it's hard even for a startup founders, and these are real family members.
Yeah, it's a perennial problem and it's a real challenge, and it's one that most families don't get right. And one of the reasons why they don't get it right is because they find it very difficult to separate business from family and business from pleasure. And it is so important when you are in a family with a serious business and serious wealth to manage expectations and set boundaries. But it is also so important to do it collaboratively. And what I so often see is that when I come in to work with these families, that there has been a very unilateral autocratic process that's taken place, usually by a very small team of people saying, this is how it's going to be, with no real collaboration with the very people that it affects. And as we all know, if somebody foists something upon you without you really having had the opportunity to kind of be part of that process, it usually creates, at best, it creates some level of frustration, but at worst, it creates a level of anger and resentment. And so, one of the things that I do with all the families I work with is I make this an incredibly inclusive process where we genuinely get families to work as a team and they're really collaborating and it's inclusive. And that's what I come back to, that point about governance, which is it all starts from a place of love. You cannot have any founder or any business or any patriarch dictating business with an I win, you lose, fear-based fighting kind of energy. Yeah, it's not going to work. Nor can you have any of the next generation showing up with energy, which is like, whatever I do, I'm going to lose. And what I see time and time again with lots of next gen members of these very wealthy families is they feel such a weight of burden, almost of responsibility coming down the track, that they're actually living in fear and they're living in freeze. Most of them are avoiding having the difficult discussions because they are afraid of the confrontation and they're afraid of what might be the answers they get. And so they'd rather not have those conversations. So to answer that question, it really requires a collaboration. It requires honesty, transparency. It requires, as I said, setting boundaries. And actually, the kindest thing to do with family businesses, as well as with with owner-founder businesses, is to be as arm's length as you possibly can be, as quickly as you possibly can be. Because where you have gray areas, where you have subjectivity, where you have things open to judgment and interpretation, you are going to have, unfortunately, a whole load of unpleasant things that are going to come forward sooner rather than later. So it's not rocket science, but I would say that the real cornerstone for it though is collaboration. It's got to be proper inclusive collaboration, not collaboration where you seem to be looking like you're ticking the boxes, but genuine collaboration where every voice is equal, everyone's being heard and listened to. The patriarch or matriarch's not trying to dominate the proceedings and force his or her will upon the family. And actually, everybody's there from a growth mindset of actually, what do we need to do in this situation to for our family and for our business so that we're here in 20, 30, 50 years. Yeah,
I love what you're saying because I think what you're revealing from having worked with these wealthy families is, at the end of the day, it comes down to we are humans, and humans operate at their highest level when they feel safe and when they I'm in an environment where people care about me, and we might have differences in different opinions, but if we create this trust, if we create a caring and loving environment, then we can solve any problems.
100%.
So that's such a
love is not a soft word. You talk about things you talk about there, being vulnerable with people, setting boundaries with people, holding people accountable, speaking your truth, allowing there to be constructive feedback, which can be pretty ruthless, like really right between the eyes. It's like, and if you're a pleaser or a fixer, or if you take things personally, you're not going to like it. But creating a really loving environment is not a soft and fluffy thing. It is a really, really hard thing. The easy thing to do is to create an environment of fear, where everybody shows up according to an old set of rules around I win, you lose, or I feel like I lose. And there's no real governance. The much harder thing to do is to strip all of that nonsense out and say, hey, we're starting from ground zero. Everybody's voice here is equal. Nothing is off balance sheet. Every elephant needs to come into this room, and we need to be honest about it. We need to be open about it, and we need to be honest about each other's strengths and weaknesses. You talk about roles and responsibilities. That's another key thing. It's like there can be no, kid gloves and treading on eggshells around the unpalatable truths, but they are truths. And if you're coming from the right place and you're doing things from a place of love, it's amazing what you can get away with. And actually not just get away with, but it's amazing what the results can look like and how empowering it can be for the family when they realize, do you know what? The worst that I imagined it to be is not that at all. It's nowhere near as bad as I imagine it to be. And that's what we do, is we catastrophize the hell out of everything. We make shit up to believe it's going to be 10 times worse than it is. And that's what stops so many people having authentic and real conversations, because they're making shit up and catastrophizing. But once you step through that door with vulnerability and you take a risk with an open heart and you have an open and honest conversation and you're authentic, it's a complete game changer in life. And when I get a patriarch or a matriarch as well to open up and to be vulnerable in front of their kids, sometimes it's the first time their children have ever seen them being truly vulnerable. And it is a complete game changer. You can literally feel the energy shift in the room. You can feel the fear just go, like just disappears. And then suddenly the weight is lifted, and suddenly people's voices come to the fore, and they are now speaking their truth. And that's what governance is really all about.
One thing I'm actually very curious to know is, just before the pandemic happened, I was in Estonia and I did a 3-day training there for startup founders from Startup Wise Guys. One thing that there was one investor who joined my training, a former corporate guy, become an investor, and we had a discussion about purpose and values, which is the core of our methodology. The Perform methodology is, culture, the softer skills, the human part, purpose and values. And I talk about, company purpose and values, and with the founders, they define what are the values they stand for.
Yeah.
And he raises his head and he's like, have you guys had this conversation in your family?
Yeah.
And everybody's just like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, I got to tell you, I'm going to lie now, but for 20 years, I had conversations with my family talking about values, talking about what we stand for, talking about our beliefs. Have you had these conversations? And I'm curious if you at your role as a coach, but also in a way mediator, right? Like to be the person that kind of connects them to open this difficult conversations. Do you have such a conversations about values? Like, is there
Yeah,
any tools that you use?
no, it's not. No, I don't think it's a. I don't think it's a particularly contentious or difficult area. Actually, to talk about values. I mean, it's often viewed as with a bit of suspicion, particularly again in the corporate world. And I think people are changing now. But as you rightly say, maybe in corporate world, actually, they're doing it more than in families, and certainly in individual family units. Most of us don't have family mission statements and vision and values. But actually, the work's comparatively easy. It's like, in IPEC, obviously, who we both train with, they have a big list that you can come up with a whole list of type of values. But it's a great thing to go through. And the way I normally do it with families is I kind of create quite a big questionnaire with a whole list of values. And I say, right, just circle intuitively. Don't think about it too much. Because again, if you get in your head, you've missed it. It's like you're going to get it wrong every single time. You're going to get it wrong every single time. Trust your intuition. Circle quickly the top 10 values that you think resonate for you on this list. And then we then drill it down to 5 each. And then we then share the top 5 with every member of the family. But the real key work, actually, when you come to values, is actually understanding what those words mean to everybody. Because we all make the assumption that love means whatever it does, or friendship or family means whatever it does, yes? Because we think, oh, this is what it means to me. It must mean somebody else understands it the same way. Bullshit, they never do. And it is one of the most revealing exercises of all is when you start talking about values with families and they start sharing. And even in the family, they're going, my God, I had no idea that you saw it that way. This has been a revelation. It's like we just talked about one word. There might be that word's friendship or loyalty. And there'll be like 7 or 8 completely different perspectives on that one word. And the real trick then, because you've got basically like 8 circles, the real trick then is to find where do all of those circles overlap? Where's the common ground? And that's the skillful part, is finding the common ground and then really drilling down into, okay, what are a real shared set of values that you guys are prepared to live by and breathe by? It's not going to sit on a shelf as a piece of paper as being kind of our family values and what have you, is that we are held accountable to, because that's a really important part of this process. Is great to do this work, but if you're then not going to follow through and be held accountable to it, waste of time, total waste of time. You've got to be held accountable to it. So in every meeting that I do, I constantly bring up and say, how do you think you were? How do you think you did? Score yourself out of 10 on how you lived and breathed that value today of integrity. And their definition of integrity was a bit like Brené Brown's: choose courage over comfort. How well do you think you did today on living that value of choosing courage over comfort today in this meeting? And it's a really great thing, because that's the loving way. That's the proper governance.
Yeah, when people think about love, they always think about the soft part of it, but I think love is not always soft, as you said. So I think we should be. This is beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I completely aligns with my understanding of it. And when we talk about values and we put a word, like, it means so many different things. And just having this conversation about why is it important for you, what does it mean for you, can open some really great conversations. And Sylvia is here. Sylvia is saying hi, Simon.
Hi, Sylvia. Namaste.
And she actually asked a question maybe like 10 minutes ago, but here's the question. Yeah. Is wealth the end of the means to your clients?
Okay. Well, that's a really great, that would be another great question from Sylvia. That's a great question. So I guess that kind of speaks a bit to the purpose of why I do this work. Because I could work with lots of different people, but I do choose to work with a lot of very wealthy families. And one of the reasons why I do is because I really, my life's mission is to raise the consciousness of people and help them come back to be closer aligned to who they were born to be. And if I can help people who are at the top end of the food chain do that in terms of wealth, and to get them to reconnect with who they were really born to be, and therefore to reestablish kind of their sense of purpose and vision for their life, which is not about just ticking boxes, and is not about just a number or wealth, but it is beyond that. And something I see time and time again, particularly with the families I work with, because I'm working with first generation to second generation wealth. Most of the wealth creators are in their 60s, maybe late 50s, but most of them are in their 60s or early 70s. They're at a different stage of their life where they're aware of their mortality. They are aware also of the issues that are going on in their families in the world. And they are so much more susceptible to having more, what I would say, proper conversations about real things, and yes, about purpose. So yeah, one of the things that I really try and spend a lot of time on is getting these wealthy families to be more consciously aware and more impactful and more purposeful, and giving back in a really meaningful way to society in whatever shape or form, it flicks their switch, because it has to be real to them. Yeah, I come back to the feelings. Unless they feel good about what they're doing, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it.
Yeah, and we have a comment from Anne, who's a good friend of mine from maybe from 9-10 years. She's a screenwriter, storyteller, whatnot else. She's saying love is not always soft. Could you elaborate, please?
Okay.
Because I said that, maybe I can just share what I meant by that. I don't know if I languaged it properly, but what I meant is love is not just the, I want to be kind and loving and just give you these good feelings. I believe love is about telling the person what you feel, telling the person the truth, and that's not always soft. That could be quite tough, But if you love somebody, you want to be upfront and you want to tell them sometimes, hey, if you keep doing this, that's not going to end well. And this is love.
My feeling is love is far from soft. I mean, love can be soft. Love is multidimensional, much more so than fear. Fear is much more single dimensional. But love is soft, but it can also be very, very tough loving. And love is really the only way. I mean, I work with a number of executives in corporates and what have you. And when you talk about love, it often triggers a negative response in them initially. So I often have to find different language. We talked about the importance of language today, but no, love is emphatically not soft. It is multifaceted, and actually, leading with love is an incredibly tough thing to do, because it requires you to take a risk. It requires you to have your heart open and therefore to be vulnerable. It requires you to hold other people accountable. It requires you to set boundaries. It requires you to look after yourself first before you look after other people. Yeah, not be a pleaser and fixer, which is what so many of us are and we're conditioned to be in our lives. It requires you to speak your truth, even when your voice is shaking and you really, really are scared of what might come back at you. Love is anything but soft. Love is an amazing thing, but it gets bad press. It gets bad press, I think, sometimes. A bit like that word authentic does nowadays.
Let us know, Anne, if this answer correlates relates with you as well. So Stoyan asked us a couple of questions, but I think this is a brilliant way to finish this episode here with this question. So Stoyan Dimitrov, who is a digital matte painter in Toronto, is asking, so I met often people who are trying to figure out what's their mission and purpose in life. My question would be, what good practices does Simon suggest for people to do to help them find what they're meant to be? Where do they start, and what are the fundamental questions one should ask themselves, which will lead them to find their purpose in life?
Wow. Okay, that's a really. So I think we've touched on quite a few parts of this already in the conversation today, but I'll try and recall and repeat some of them, and maybe sort of emphasize some other areas. And I think it depends a lot on what stage of life you're at as well. And I'm just going to re-emphasize that for younger people listening today, it's like, if you don't know what your passion and purpose is in life, that's absolutely fine. By the way, join the majority. The majority of people do not know what their passion or purpose. I did not know. I didn't know at all. So just go and do something. Life is all about momentum and movement and action. It is not about inaction. If you're stuck in freeze, the good things are not going to happen for you. If you're stuck in freeze, you're not going to put yourself in an opportunity for you to get lucky. So for you to get lucky, get out there and start doing something. Keep moving, keep the momentum going. Trial and error, fail. If you really want to find your passion in life, be prepared to fail and know that, and fail well. It's like, failure gets a bad press as well. Failure is just a stepping stone to success. You talk to the most successful people in the world, and they fail way more than they've succeeded. It's just when they succeeded big, because they learned the lessons from their failures over the periods before. So it's trial and error. I come back to focus on your feelings. If you really, really, really want to find your passion and purpose in life, focus on the feelings that you want a lot more of in your life, because that's going to give you a pretty good clue as to where you should be going. And if you're struggling to focus on the feelings that you want more of in your life, go back into your past and maybe into your childhood and pick up some moments in your life when you really did feel good about yourself. And how would you describe those emotions and those feelings? Because that's giving you a pretty good clue. And what were you doing? And who were you spending time with? Yeah. Where were you? Were you in a city? Were you in nature? Were you with high-level people who were championing you? Or were you with people who were all naysayers and the glass was half empty? Yeah. Because it's all about feelings. And I think what scares you as well. It's like, unless you're in mortal danger, and this has been a huge lesson for me in life, unless you're in mortal danger, whatever scares you is probably a flag pointing you in the direction that you need to move to find your passion and purpose in life. So get out of your comfort zone. Don't be comfortable. You're not going to find your passion and purpose by being comfortable. We all have, as human beings, a high need for certainty. And unfortunately, we also often have a high need for significance, which is our ego. And those two do not go hand in hand well if you want a life of fulfillment and you want to grow. So if you want to grow, you've got to take a risk and you've got to move forward and you've got to be prepared to fail. And that means motion, and do the things that scare you. Whatever scares you, and it's not scares you in like a feeling of complete dread, like, oh my God, that really is, but it's scary good. That's what you should be doing. I've lost you, Stoy. For those of you waiting, I think Stoy's just got kicked off. He's coming straight back on, so he'll be on in a second.
All right. Technical. Thank you for being here.
No worries.
So, yeah. So hello everybody. Once again, I'm back to wrap up this show. Thank you, Simon, for being here, waiting for me. My computer just restarted. Beautiful. So Simon, I just want to finish with a question we got from Razvan just last minute.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, I think the topic for billionaires has been quite a hot topic today. But Razvan's question is: could you please name 8 behavioral patterns noticed at billionaires? And then he gives you the number: 4 given by Mother Nature, and 4 develop across their careers.
Ooh. I'm not sure I completely understand that question. Is it asking about traits of billionaires or asking
behavioral patterns?
Behavioral patterns.
Something that you can sense, by nature, billionaires are behaving like this, and then throughout their journey, they develop those traits that made them successful.
Yeah. Again, I think we covered some of this before, but I would say that the single biggest differentiator with everybody who's a billionaire is just that monomaniacal focus. It's obsession. And there's a fine line between obsession being a good or a bad thing, and you have to be the judge of that yourselves. But, you don't get that successful and that wealthy by having a truly balanced life in every other area. You've got to be single-mindedly focused to a level of almost obsession. And it has to be your entire life to generate and create that kind of a wealth. Because you've only got so many hours in a day, and you have to choose your time carefully. And what I would say is that these guys who are uber successful, they choose their time very carefully, but it is with a single-minded focus. And that does mean that it comes at the expense of some other things not getting much time and attention in their lives, because you've only got so many hours in a day. And I think we also talked about their unrelenting positivity, I guess, and their ability to bend reality. Is that, we are the stories that we believe about ourselves. And if there's one thing that I can say about every single billionaire I've worked with, is that the stories that they believe about themselves are pretty empowering. They walk into a room with a high level of certainty and conviction about who they are as a human being. And trust me when I say that they don't have many limiting beliefs when they walk in that room about what the outcome is going to be, or what they want to get out of that meeting, or what's going to happen as a result of that relationship. They have a high level of conviction in themselves, and they have pretty empowering belief systems about how they're going to show up. Yeah, and that relates into energy, and that relates then into what they then get back.
Thank you so much, Simon. Thank you so much for being here with me today, answering all these questions. Those of you who are watching, I hope you guys had a lot of good insights from Simon. If you have any more comments, maybe notes, it would be great for us to see what was the most important thing that you heard today. What was the one thing that you heard today? And I just something that clicked for you, but something that you're going to take with you and apply it forward. Write us in the comments, what was this thing? And Simon, before we go, where could people find you? Where could people follow you? I'm sure a lot of people now will be like, okay, I want to know more. I want more content. I want to work with Simon.
Yeah, well, it's an exciting time. Okay, so I'll answer that question. So I have an old website for my coaching, which is simonhodges.com, which is about to be refreshed in the next 10 days. So please, if you visit my website now, just please know that it's old and it's about to be completely refreshed. And I'm launching a new, very dynamic website because I'm actually launching my own online academy for groups this year, which I'm very excited about. And I also have a consulting website, which will be going live, which will be hodges.je. That's going to go live in about 10 days as well. But I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Insta as well as Simon Hodges, or I think I've also got a Simon Hodges coaching page, which is just literally launched. I haven't started posting to it yet because it's all about to happen. I've kept a very low profile in my life to date, but I've made a conscious decision this year as part of my growth that I need to put my voice out there more because hopefully I can help other people. And hopefully today, some of what I've said to you guys has been helpful and useful. It's been a joy, though.
Thank you so much, everybody joining. It's been a pleasure having you guys. And Simon, once again, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your wisdom, and all the best on the journey. I hope to see a lot of you online, a lot of you, sharing your wisdom and insights. As you said, quality matters, but I also think the gift that you have, the commitment that you have, and the heart that you're putting in everything deserves to be seen by a larger number of people.
Thanks, Stoy. Well, it's a complete pleasure to be on with you here today. It really is. It's awesome. Thank you very much, everybody.
Have a great one, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.